This story is titled, I Paid Bills at Home, but Mom moved her friend and kids into my room. So I left, and now she's begging me back. Hey everyone! If you're enjoying these stories and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps me bring you even more awesome content like this. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, living at home at 23 isn't exactly what I had planned for my life, but it worked out for the most part. I wasn't freeloading or anything. I paid rent, covered the electricity bill, and even paid for my mom's phone plan. It's not like I was just lying around eating snacks and playing video games. Honestly, the deal was pretty good. I had my own space, got home-cooked meals, and could focus on my freelance work without worrying too much about big expenses. I had even turned my room into a mini studio for my content creation gigs, which I was hoping would take off soon. Everything was fine until my mom's best friend Kelly moved in with her 2 kids. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I understood the situation. Kelly was going through a nasty divorce, and her husband, according to my mom, was a complete jerk. They needed somewhere to stay, and our house was their best option. I thought it would be temporary, just a few weeks until Kelly got back on her feet. At first, they stayed in the guest room, and it wasn't a big deal. Sure, the kids were a little loud, but I just closed my door and put on my headphones. It wasn't ideal, but I could manage. The guest room wasn't huge, but it was enough for Kelly and her kids to crash in for a while. I figured that was the arrangement, and I didn't give it much thought. That changed fast. One day, I came home after running some errands and noticed something weird right away. My door was open, and I could hear kids laughing inside. When I walked in, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My bed was covered in toys, my desk chair was moved, and one of the kids was on my computer. My studio setup, my expensive microphone, lighting, and camera was shoved to the corner of the room like it didn't matter. Kelly's kids were running around like they owned the place, and all my stuff was just out of place. I yelled, "What the hell is going on?" Probably louder than I should have, but I was in shock. My mom walked in and immediately started scolding me, like I was the one out of line. She said, "Calm your tits, it's not a big deal. The kids needed more space and your room is the biggest. It's only fair." Fair? My room? The one I was paying rent for? I told her I wanted them out of my room immediately, but she brushed me off like I was being ridiculous. "They need to be comfortable," she said. "You're being selfish." Selfish? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't about comfort. It was about respect. My room wasn't just a place I slept in. It was where I worked. My studio setup had cost me over $3,000, and it wasn't something I could just throw into a corner and ignore. I explained all of this, but my mom wasn't having it. "They're just kids," she said, "and they want to play on your computer. Stop making such a fuss." I shut that idea down immediately. "No way are they touching my equipment," I said. "If anything happens to it, I'm screwed." That's when Kelly chimed in. She said, "Oh, come on. They're just curious, and you can't blame them. Maybe if you weren't so uptight, they'd listen to you." I was stunned. Uptight? I wasn't uptight. I was trying to protect my stuff I worked hard for. I told her flat out that the kids weren't allowed to touch my things, and if they did, I'd hold her responsible. That didn't go over well. She called me selfish too, and my mom agreed with her. It was like I was suddenly the bad guy in my own home. After that first blow-up, things in the house got tense. I couldn't believe my mom and Kelly were siding against me, especially when I was the one paying rent, but I figured they'd realize how ridiculous this was after they calmed down. The next day, I tried talking to my mom again. I explained how much my studio equipment meant to me, not just financially, but professionally. Freelancing isn't just some hobby. It's my job. Without my gear, I couldn't do my work, and replacing it would take me months, maybe even years to save up for. I told her, "Mom, I'm not trying to be a jerk, but this isn't fair. I'm paying rent for that room, and you just gave it away without even asking me." Her response? "You're being dramatic. It's my house, and I decide what happens in it." I was stunned. "Your house? I pay rent. I'm contributing here, not just squatting for free." She shrugged like it didn't matter. "The kids need space. Your brother's room is too small, and your sister's room is full of her things. Besides, your room has all that fancy stuff and they like it better." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My siblings, both 15, had rooms that were perfectly fine. Sure, my brother's room was smaller, but it was big enough for 2 kids. My sister's room was almost as big as mine, and honestly, she barely used it since she was always out with her friends. But my mom wouldn't even consider it. "The kids love your room because it's cooler," she said. "All your fancy gadgets make it more fun for them." Fun? This wasn't about fun. My room wasn't some playhouse for Kelly's kids to mess around in. It was where I worked, where I relaxed, where I lived. I told her, if they break anything, are you going to replace it? Because I can't afford to. That's when Kelly chimed in again. Oh, stop being so paranoid. They're kids, not monsters. If you'd just let them play, they'd probably leave your stuff alone, I snapped. Let them play? On my $3,000 setup? Are you serious? No way. Kelly rolled her eyes and said, You're being selfish. This is a hard time for us, and you're making it all about you. At that point, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned to my mom and said, If they're staying in my room, I need to move my stuff out. I can't risk them damaging it. She laughed, actually laughed, and said, Where are you going to put it? There's no space anywhere else. So I'm just supposed to let them trash my stuff? I asked, my voice rising. How is that fair? My mom just shook her head. Life isn't fair. You're an adult. You should be able to handle a little inconvenience. A little inconvenience? Being kicked out of my own room wasn't a little inconvenience. It was disrespectful. I was paying rent for that space, and now I couldn't even use it. And on top of that, I wasn't allowed to go into my room anymore. My mom said it was their space now and that I had no right to barge in. For the next few days, I tried to stay out of the house as much as possible. I'd hang out at coffee shops trying to get work done on my laptop, but it wasn't the same. Without my studio setup, my productivity tanked. I was falling behind on deadlines and my stress levels were through the roof. I tried one last time to reason with my mom. Look, I said, I'll make a deal. Let me move my setup into the guest room and they can stay in my room. That way, I can still work and they can have the space they need. She didn't even think about it. The guest room is too cramped for all your stuff. You'll just have to wait until Kelly gets back on her feet. How long is that going to take? I asked, frustrated. She shrugged. As long as it takes. You don't get to set deadlines for other people's struggles. I couldn't believe this was happening. It wasn't like I hated Kelly or her kids. I understood they were going through a rough time, and I was willing to help. But this wasn't helping. It was enabling. Kelly wasn't paying anything to stay with us, and now I was basically being pushed out of my own life to accommodate them. Later that night, I overheard Kelly talking to my mom in the kitchen. She was complaining about me, calling me selfish and immature. She said, He doesn't even understand how hard this is for us. He's just being a brat. My mom agreed, saying, He's always been stubborn. He'll get over it. That was the final straw. I realized they didn't care about me or my situation. I was just a paycheck to my mom and a roadblock to Kelly and her kids. They weren't going to listen, and they weren't going to change. The next day, I started looking for rooms to rent. It wasn't an easy decision. I loved living at home, despite the occasional drama. It was affordable, and I got along with my siblings. But I couldn't stay in a place where I wasn't respected. After days of feeling like a stranger in my own home, I decided enough was enough. It wasn't just about the room anymore. It was about respect. I was paying rent, contributing to bills, and trying to build a future for myself, but none of that seemed to matter to my mom or Kelly. They had decided my needs came last, and I was tired of it. One night, I sat my mom down in the living room. My siblings were upstairs, and Kelly was putting her kids to bed, so it was just the two of us. I figured if I could make her see how serious I was, she'd finally listen. Mom, I started, keeping my voice calm. We need to talk. She gave me a tired look. What now? I can't keep living like this, I said. I've been paying rent for that room, and now I can't even use it. You gave it away without asking me, and it's not fair. She sighed and leaned back on the couch. We've been over this. It's temporary. Kelly and the kids are going through a hard time. You're young, and you can adapt. That's not the point, I shot back. It's not about adapting. It's about respect. You didn't ask me. You just decided my room wasn't mine anymore. And now I can't even work because all my stuff is packed up or shoved into a corner. You're being dramatic, she said, waving me off. This is my house, and I get to decide what happens in it. That line again. Every time she said it, it felt like a slap in the face. If this is your house, I said, then why am I paying rent? If you're going to treat me like a guest, maybe I shouldn't be paying anything at all. Her eyes narrowed. Don't you dare pull that. You know I need your help with the bills. Then treat me like I matter, I snapped. You can't take my money every month and then turn around and tell me I have no say. That's not how this works. She looked at me like I was crazy. What do you want me to do? Throw Kelly and her kids out on the street? They have nowhere else to go. I shook my head. No, but there are other options. They could stay in the guest room, or they could move into one of my siblings' rooms. Hell, you could even rotate rooms so everyone takes turns sharing the space. But taking my room and locking me out of it? That's not okay. She crossed her arms. Your brother and sister are too young to share their rooms, and the guest room is too small for 3 people. Your room was the best option. No, it was the easiest option, I said. You didn't want to deal with the hassle, so you dumped it on me. At that point, I could feel my frustration boiling over. I'll make this simple, I said, looking her straight in the eye. Either Kelly and the kids move out of my room, or I move out of the house. Those are your options. She blinked, caught off guard. Don't be ridiculous. Where would you even go? I've already started looking for rooms to rent, I told her. If you're not going to respect me or the fact that I'm paying to live here, then I'll find somewhere else to live. She scoffed. You're bluffing. You can't afford to move out. I leaned back and crossed my arms. Try me. The next few days were tense. I didn't bring up the ultimatum again, but it hung in the air like a storm cloud. My mom didn't take me seriously, which just made me more determined. I spent every spare moment scrolling through rental listings, messaging landlords, and figuring out my budget. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew I could make it work if I cut back on non-essentials. Meanwhile, things at home were worse than ever. Kelly's kids had turned my room into their personal playground, and I couldn't do anything about it. I wasn't even allowed to step inside without someone throwing a fit. Once I tried to grab a few things I'd left behind, a pair of headphones and some books, and Kelly snapped at me. What are you doing in here? She demanded, standing in the doorway with her hands on her hips. I need my stuff, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She shook her head. You can't just barge in whenever you want. This is their room now. I stared at her, speechless. Are you kidding me? This is my room. Not anymore, she said, her tone icy. You need to respect their space. Respect their space? The irony nearly made me laugh. I'm paying rent for this room, I said, through gritted teeth. I'll grab my stuff and leave, but don't tell me to respect their space when no one respects mine. She muttered something under her breath and walked away, but the damage was done. That was the moment I realized there was no fixing this. My mom wasn't going to back me up, and Kelly wasn't going to change. If I wanted things to get better, I'd have to take matters into my own hands. A week after the ultimatum, I found a room for rent that I could afford. It wasn't anything fancy, a small place in an older building, but it was mine. The landlord was friendly, and the space was clean enough. Most importantly, I could set up my studio without worrying about kids touching my equipment. I didn't tell my mom right away. I wanted to make sure everything was finalized before I dropped the bombshell. When I signed the lease, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Moving out wasn't what I had planned, but staying wasn't an option anymore. I had to put myself first, even if it meant leaving behind the home I'd grown up in. The next step was moving my stuff out. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, especially with my mom and Kelly breathing down my neck, but I didn't care anymore. I was done playing nice. Once I signed the lease for my new place, I knew I had to act fast. If I gave my mom too much notice, she'd find a way to make the move even harder. So I planned it out carefully. I told a few close friends what was going on, and 2 of them agreed to help me pack and move my stuff. One of them even offered to record everything on their phone, just in case things got ugly. The night before the move, I sat down with my mom one last time. I wanted to give her one final chance to make things right. Mom, I started, keeping my voice calm. I've found a place to rent, and I'm moving out tomorrow. She looked up from her phone, surprised. You're really doing this? Yeah, I said, nodding. You didn't leave me much choice. She rolled her eyes. You're overreacting. This whole thing is temporary. You're leaving over nothing. It's not nothing, I said firmly. You gave away my room, locked me out of it, and told me I didn't have a say in the matter. I'm paying rent, and you treated me like I was just disposable. She sighed, like I was exhausting her. You know I need your rent money to keep this house running. If you leave, how am I supposed to pay the bills? I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. That's not my problem anymore, I said. You made it clear that this isn't my house. You said it's your house, your rules. Well, if that's the case, then I don't have to stay here. She glared at me. So you're just going to leave us high and dry? I shrugged. You can ask Kelly to start paying rent, or her husband since they're still married. I don't owe you anything. She didn't say anything after that, just gave me a cold look and went back to her phone. I took that as my cue to leave. The next day, my friends showed up bright and early with a couple of cars and a rented van. We were ready to get everything done as quickly as possible. I'd already packed most of my stuff into boxes, but I still had to get my studio set up out of my old room. When we got to the house, Kelly and her kids were already awake. The kids were running around the living room, and Kelly was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. She gave me a suspicious look as soon as I walked in. What's going on? She asked, narrowing her eyes. I'm moving out, I said simply. Her eyebrows shot up. Seriously? You're leaving because of this? That's pathetic. I ignored her and headed upstairs to my room. or what used to be my room. When I opened the door, the sight almost made me sick. My bed was covered in stuffed animals and toys, and my desk was piled high with random junk. My computer, microphone, and camera were shoved into a corner, looking like they hadn't been touched in weeks. I turned to one of my friends. "Start recording." He pulled out his phone and began filming as I carefully started packing up my equipment. Kelly must have realized what was happening because she came upstairs and started yelling. "You can't just barge in here and start taking stuff," she shouted. "This is their room now." I turned to her, trying to stay calm. "It's my stuff, Kelly. I paid for it, and I'm taking it with me." She crossed her arms. "You're being ridiculous. You're throwing a tantrum over a couple of kids needing space." "This isn't a tantrum," I said, my voice steady. "This is me standing up for myself. You and my mom have treated me like I don't matter, and I'm done with it." She started yelling again, but I tuned her out and kept packing. My friends helped me load everything into the van while one of them kept filming, just in case Kelly or my mom tried to pull something. By the time we finished, my mom had come upstairs to see what was going on. When she saw the empty room, she flipped out. "You're really doing this?" she asked, her voice shaking with anger. "You're leaving us just because you didn't get your way?" I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm leaving because you didn't respect me. I paid rent for this room, and you gave it away without even asking. You made it clear that I'm not a priority here, so I'm making myself a priority." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand. "Don't. I've made my decision." As I carried the last box out to the van, Kelly stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, glaring at me. "Good luck out there," she said sarcastically. "You're going to realize how selfish you've been when things get hard." I didn't even bother responding. I just climbed into the van and drove off with my friends. That night, after I'd moved into my new place and started unpacking, my phone blew up with texts from my mom. She was furious, saying I was selfish and inconsiderate for leaving her in a tough spot. She accused me of abandoning the family and leaving her to deal with the bills on her own. "You've always been so selfish," one text read. "I can't believe you'd do this to me after everything I've done for you." I typed out a response but deleted it. I didn't owe her an explanation. She'd made her choices, and now I was making mine. After moving into my new place, the first thing I felt was relief. No more fighting, no more disrespect, and most importantly, no more feeling like I didn't matter. Sure, my new room was smaller, and the building wasn't exactly top-notch, but it was quiet, and it was mine. I unpacked my studio equipment first, carefully setting it up in the corner of my room. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe, but the peace didn't last long. My mom started texting me the next morning, blowing up my phone with message after message. She wanted to know if I'd paid rent for the month yet, and when I told her I wasn't paying since I had moved out, she lost it. "You haven't even reached the 25th yet," she texted. "You owe me for the rest of this month." I rolled my eyes. "No, I don't," I replied. "I'm not living there anymore, so I'm not paying rent. You can ask Kelly to cover it." Her response came almost instantly. "Kelly doesn't have money to pay rent. You know that. You're leaving me to handle everything on my own, and I can't afford it." "That's not my problem," I texted back. "You made it clear that it's your house, your rules. Well, now it's your bills, your responsibility." She didn't like that answer. She started calling me selfish, immature, and ungrateful. According to her, I was tearing the family apart by leaving. At first, the guilt started creeping in. I'd always helped out financially, and I knew my contributions had made a big difference. But then I reminded myself why I'd left in the first place. My mom had treated me like I was disposable, so why should I feel bad for putting myself first? The next week, the guilt trips turned into anger. My mom sent long, rambling texts about how I was ruining everything. One text read, "You've embarrassed me. Everyone in the family is asking why you left, and I don't know what to tell them." I didn't bother replying. I knew whatever I said would just fuel the fire. Instead, I focused on settling into my new place. I caught up on work, got my studio fully functional again, and started feeling like myself. It was amazing how much better I felt without all the chaos and negativity weighing me down. A few days later, my sister called me out of the blue. I hadn't heard much from her since I moved out, so I figured she wanted to check in. But as soon as I picked up, I realized she had a different agenda. "Mom's really upset," she said, skipping the small talk. "She says you're not paying rent this month, and now she's freaking out about the bills." "I'm not living there anymore," I said, keeping my tone calm. "Why should I pay rent for a place I'm not living in?" "But you know she can't afford it without you," my sister argued. "You've always helped out. Why stop now?" "Because she didn't respect me," I said bluntly. "She gave away my room, locked me out of it, and treated me like I didn't matter. I'm done being taken advantage of." My sister sighed. It's not that simple. Kelly's going through a lot, and Mom's just trying to help. I get that, I said. But why does helping Kelly mean screwing me over? I was paying rent for that room. I had every right to keep it. She didn't mean to screw you over, my sister said weakly. She's just stressed. So am I shot back. But no one cared about that when I was being pushed out of my own room. She didn't have much to say after that. We talked for a few more minutes, mostly about her school stuff, and then hung up. I could tell she was stuck in the middle, but I wasn't going to let her guilt me into changing my mind. As the days went on, the texts from my mom started tapering off. I think she realized I wasn't going to budge. But then she pulled one last stunt that made me glad I'd left. One morning, I woke up to a text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. It said, "Hey, I heard about the drama with your mom. Are you okay?" Confused, I asked what they were talking about. That's when they sent me a screenshot of a Facebook post my mom had made. In it, she painted me as the villain, claiming I'd abandoned her and the family during their time of need. She left out the part where she gave my room away, of course, and made it sound like I'd left out of sheer spite. I was furious. It was one thing to argue with me privately, but airing our dirty laundry online? That was too far. I didn't respond to the post, though. I figured it wasn't worth the effort. Let her play the victim if that's what she needed to do. I knew the truth, and so did the people who actually mattered. Now, a month later, I'm fully settled into my new place. My work is back on track, my stress levels are way down, and I'm finally starting to feel like myself again. My mom still texts me occasionally, but I keep the conversations short and stick to neutral topics. I've learned to set boundaries, and I'm not letting her guilt trip me anymore. Do I feel bad about leaving? Sometimes, yeah. It sucks that things had to end this way, but I don't regret my decision. I deserve respect, and if my mom couldn't give me that, then I had to find it elsewhere. Moving out was the best thing I could have done for myself, and I'm not looking back. Was I the a-hole for leaving and refusing to pay rent for the rest of the month? I don't think so. I tried to be reasonable, but my mom made it clear that I didn't matter as much as Kelly and her kids. At the end of the day, I had to put myself first. If that makes me selfish, so be it.